In a surprise and unexpected move last Wednesday, President Muhammadu Buhari declared June 12th as Democracy Day in Nigeria. Some have hailed this, others have called it to question. What was your reaction when you had this announcement?
Well, it was a mix of surprise and a bit of shock. But then, historically, when you look at the history of this country, one also shouldn't be that deeply surprised. Don't forget that in 2014, President Jonathan actually honored the late Sani Abacha towards the 2015 election. So it has always been a tradition for politicians to look for every opportunity to score cheap political goals. But beyond the political contest, we also have to look at the merit. It has its own merit, also has its own demerits. For long, we have waited for about 25 years for official recognition of the significance of June 12th election, and also for an opportunity to honor what took place on that day. To me, it's not just about Chief M.K. Abiola. We have to put it in historical context. June 12, 1993 was the apex of a string of struggles, of campaigns by Nigerian people, traumatized Nigerian people, that wanted an end to military rule. And it all started in 1986 when Adeoye was killed through a parcel bomb. And people started suspecting the intention of the military regime of Babangida. Because this man, they sent a parcel bomb to me and then it exploded and he died. We have never seen such a thing in our history. And then that same year, about 20 students of the Ahmadu Bello University were killed. There was a student protest, 3 students had been expelled in 1986 at ABU. And then the students decided to stage a protest. And the process walked through, in front of the female hostel. And then the then Vice Chancellor, Anglo Abdullahi, invited policemen to invade the campus. The campus was invaded. The soldiers and policemen went straight into female hostels. They killed about 9 students after many of those girls had been raped. It was strange. It was traumatizing. And then people were caught unaware that this regime just came in 1985, just less than 2 years. Look at the atrocities being perpetrated against Nigerians. And then I remember about 15 higher institutions were closed down in 1986. At that time, I was at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and I was part of the Progressive Youth Movement. And then everybody rallied around in support of what happened in ABU. Riots in Bayero, and then the authorities, responded by closing down institutions, and then set up a kangaroo panel, and also asked Labour to send representatives, and then NANS to send a representative, and also denied that 20 people were not killed, but only 4 students were killed. And up to today, those policemen that carry out that atrocities are yet to be found or to be made to account for their atrocities. After that incident, there was a protest by the workers' union, representing NEPA. And Babangida clamped down on them and gave life jail to these workers for protesting against the conditions of service, in the electricity union sector. And then this was followed by series of protests on the streets leading to the killing of the Dawoodi brothers at Oshodi, where 2 brothers from the same family were shot dead. And a lot of series of human rights violations that are too numerous to be remembered. I remember that at that time, the soldiers who invade Ojuelegba, attack students, attack market women under the guise of banning street trading. And then they would take the women to Alausa, where they will be raped before their goods will be released to them. So there are so many, cases of right violations that were going on. And then it cumulated into the introduction of SAP, Structural Adjustment Program, and then the riots of 1989, where not less than 150 people were killed. So Babangida became a kind of a terror onto the people of Nigeria. And there was that kind of groundswell of opposition from students, from workers, and even from within the military, which led to the Phantom Coup of 1986, when General Vatsa was killed. And then in 1990, a lot of military, young military men rose up, in the 1990 coup, April 22, 1990 coup, to say, look, enough of Babangida's rule. We wanted you to go. Though they lost that battle, but at least 76 military officers were killed. So the opposition against Babangida was not restricted to the student movement alone. Workers, students, NANS was banned, the NLC was banned, they imposed an administrator, and then later Pascal Bafaya was brought in. So the country was passing through a kind of, cultural genocide being perpetrated by the military. And then people came together and said, look, we must come together and resist, this regime, ensure that the military was chased out of power. And in 1989, so 1990, the campaign for democracy started after a conference that was held at the National Theatre, led by the Ife Collective. Because the academic was also, victims of the repression. Don't forget Patrick Wilmot. Dr. Patrick Wilmot at ABU was bundled in one afternoon and, repatriated back to his country. He's a Jamaican. And then at the Amadou Bello at the University of Benin, Festus Yayi, just one afternoon, the police attacked him, took his family and bundled them out. At Ife, the same thing happened. So the academic was under assault apart from the students' community. And then people said, look, it was enough, it's enough. Babangida must go. And then he set up a kind of transition program, which he will set up, people will contest, then he disband, the process again, ban and unban politicians. And then he said on the national TV that we know those that will succeed us. We know those that will. So it meant that the whole concept of June 12, the transition program, was predetermined. He wanted a candidate that will continue and protect his own interests. So SDP and NRC, though they said there were two political parties brought to unite Nigeria along religious lines, but then you have to put it within context. Those two political parties were imposed on Nigerians. The choice of Nigerians was narrowed down to only two political parties. Socio-political organizations like Afenifere and all of them were banned. The student movement, former student union leaders, progressive movements, the left were banned from participation in that transition program. And of course, Shifem Abiola was his friend. So he felt that he needed an ally that will, defend his own interest. But it got out of hand. Because that election, people came out and said, look, even though we do not support this sanction program, but we want anything but military rule, let us support either of Tofa or Abiola so that we can get the military out of the way. That was how Nigerians came together to say, look, we are going to vote on that day, and then just for the military to go so that we can sort out ourselves. And when the election was annulled, the initial thinking was that MK Abiola would give up and then support the military. But he saw the momentum, the uprising on the streets, the global campaign, the networking everywhere and grassroots and everywhere, and he knew that this was a revolution and that there was no need for him to betray, the momentum, the revolutionary flavor. At that time.
Let me take you up on that, and especially during that period when you and others were actively involved in the struggle to sustain the mandate, the Abiola mandate then. Could you tell us, why did the movement collapse at that particular point in time?
Yeah, I think it's quite unfortunate that one of the best organizations that ever emerged in this country to lead the people to salvation was Campaign for Democracy. But it broke up at a point. I think it's quite unfortunate. I would think that, first of all, there are so many factors, not limited to just one factor. There was state penetration. There was a lack of, an organized leadership. Leadership problem was also a major problem that we confronted at that time. And then lack of a kind of an effective work plan in terms of what we actually wanted. So I think we can't pin it down to just one factor. There are so many factors that were involved. And of course, we can't run away from the fact that ethnicity also played a major role. There was at a time that people started seeing the June 12 struggle as merely, a Southwest affair. Even though we had a lot of committed comrades from the north, people like Riwa and Lukman, Shehu Sani, that was part of the June 12 movement. But there was a conscious effort by the ruling class to divide that movement along ethnic lines. It was also one of the major problems that affected us. Of course, we also had our own problem, inability to manage internal crisis, which led to the split of Campaign for Democracy, where democratic alternative also emerged. And Chima Obani had to go with DA, while Bekon and Sokuti and Co. remained with Campaign for Democracy. I think that division was quite unfortunate, and it could have been avoided.
Now, tell us about your experience during that period.
Yeah, first of all, apart from being part of the student movement at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, with myself and Chima Obani, Maizazo, Joshua Ogadima, Innocent Chukuma, Kennedy Ononaike, and a good number of people. We as students at that time felt democracy was also in our interest. That it was not just about elections, that we needed to also ensure the democratic, because we are also victims of the repressive regime at that moment. But then I left UNN and then became part of the labor movement. And then later, I started working in Guardian as a reporter in 1989. And I remember the riot that we had in 1993. I was part of that riot because I felt as a reporter, one should be able to take side with the people, not just about writing about what was happening, but you must also take very active part, in a process that will lead to free speech and democratic rule. So I was arrested alongside Dr. Bekoram Sokuti, Nick Ransom Kuti, Tokunbo Afikuyomi, Mayegun, and a host of others, and I think Gani Fahmi was our lawyer, and we were detained for about 4 days. We were taken to court, and good enough, Fahmi was able to intimidate that judge, and we were set free. But that was not the end. I remember that in 1996 too, I was arrested by the Director of Military Intelligence because there was a young journalist who was writing a cop reporter for Vanguard newspaper, Bumi Aborishade. And he wrote a small piece, and he was passing through Oshodi. Oshodi was very chaotic at that moment, not knowing there was a covert agent working for the DMI, Secret Service of the military. And then the man out of that huge crowd just singled him out and said, "Look, come here. What did you have in your bag?" He sacked the bag, and Bumi Aborishade was holding a piece that he wanted to go and submit in Vanguard. The title of that piece was "How Nigerians Can Liberate Themselves." It was handwritten. This operative read that 10-page from beginning to the end. And at the end, Aborishade ended that article with the piece, "Nigerians must harness the resources at their disposal to liberate themselves." And it was just about 2 weeks after there was a bomb explosion at Keja Cantonment. So the man just roped him up, and said, "Look, you must know something about this." And that was how he ended up at first he spent 28 days at State Security Service Office, detention camp, and then later he was taken to DMI, where he spent almost about another 1 month. And then when he came out, I was in the Guardian. He came together and said, "Look, I have a story." I just came and said, "Oh, interesting." Though we were part of the campaign to free him. So I was excited to interview him. And then the following Sunday, I wrote that piece. Then I now mentioned the names of those he met in detention, like Moshood Fahemiwo, like Major Onya, and also, of course, the ADC to General Dia, who had been arrested unknowingly to many Nigerians. So when my story came out on Sunday, Mustafa called Colonel Omenka and said, "Look," because I wrote in that story that this man that was released is the publisher of June 12 newspaper. Apparently, when he was kept for about 2 months, they never knew he was the publisher of June 12 newspaper, and they had been looking for the publisher. So I just innocently, included that. And Mustafa called Omeka and said, "Look, you must get this journalist." And they came to Guardian on the Monday, about 10 armed soldiers. They came, there was not around, but somebody came to my house to tell me that soldiers were around. So I just said, "Well, what is the point? I didn't kill any human being." So on Tuesday I was there, and I will speak up with the managing director, Ladi Bonola, and Femi Kusa. who was the editor of Guardian. And then I was taken to their detention camp. You know, I was questioned. That was the day Kudirat Abiola was killed. And while sitting down there, I saw them communicating with Abuja, Mustafa, talking on walkie-talkie, you know, talking about trying to monitor Kudirat Abiola's movement, saying that they are taken to one hospital, they will pass on that information to them, they will relate to each other. I was there, and I was kept there until 1 a.m. And then they asked me so many questions. And of course, I had to give them, you know, answers that are not realistic. My home address, I didn't give them the real home address. They asked about my background, whether I was in the student movement. I said no. I was a member of the Christian Union. They asked me whether I knew Chima Obani. I said no. Aborisha, how do you come to know me? I said, well, I just met him. He came to Guardian. Actually, I attended the same school with Aborisha, the same secondary school. So eventually they said they should follow me to my house. Thank goodness they never did. Because in my house at that night, we had not less than 10 activists that the government was looking for them. You know, that they were prized booty of the government, including Oronto, including Odeon, Ahaine, including a lot of them. So if they had followed me to my house that day, and of course, with a load of pamphlets, campaign for democracy pamphlet that we wanted to distribute on the streets. So I was just lucky that they didn't. If they had followed me, people would have been dead by now. So they said they should follow me to my house, and then suddenly one Captain Idowu said, let's take him. Okay, they bundled me, took me in the car. Then later, Colonel Omeka came out and said, look, allow the idiots to go. You stay here till morning. Then you'll be reporting to DMI every day. So that was what saved me and a lot of my colleagues. And they asked me to go and look for Aborisha. If I don't produce him, I'll be in trouble. When I got home that morning, Aborisha was right in my house. You know, so eventually Aborisha left Nigeria. He traveled to Ghana, and then from there to the United States. But the irony is that Aborisha is an associate professor now. His dream in life had always been I wanted to study in US and to be a professor. So how that thing played out, you know, only nature can explain it. Today he lectures in the university in New York, and he's an associate professor, and I still spoke with him about just last week. So I tell you that a lot of people suffered depression. I remember the case of Professor Agbolu. He came from the US, a Yoruba professor. They saw him at the airport and said, look, what's your name? Oh, you must be a member of Egbeomo Odua in US. That was the end. Up to today, we don't know what happened to Professor Agbolu. The case of Chinedu Ofaro, were in Guardian newspaper together. Up to today, he disappeared. No trace. The case of one other prince who was secretary to Andy Akorogu in African Guardian, he disappeared. Up to today, there's no trace about him. Tunde Oladipo was shot right in the front of his children and his wife, you know, at Abeokuta. His wife had to relocate to, you know, to Canada. The day he was being buried, those who murdered him appeared at the burial ground. They were cited by his wife. They were cited by Tunde Oladipo's children. And that trauma, I'm sure that woman will find it very difficult to recover. That was why she had to relocate from this country to Canada. So when you are talking about honoring Abiola, it's not just about seeking for peace. It's also about justice. I know of people like Colonel Ajayi, who was kept at Ikoyi Cemetery for several months, you know, and then they brutalized him. Another Colonel M.A. Ajayi, and so many soldiers, so many policemen. There was one DSP, Dari, who was investigating the death of Delegiwa. He died mysteriously. Up to today, nobody has been able to account for. So it's not just about honoring people. You must also create the mechanism to address the injustice of the past, so as to give confidence to future generations of Nigerians.
That is sad. It's really, really an eye-opener, I mean, getting this perspective. So, away from the historical perspective of what happened after June 12 till this period in time, and the declaration by the presidency, some of the opinion that the president has not even done enough in this regard. What's your take on that?
Well, I think we can admit that he has started the healing process. But if our decision is justice, I can't even see it in sight. Because when we are going to give honor to Abiola, we are also giving honor to Kingibe, the man who consciously betrayed June 12th, you know. And of course, just 2 weeks earlier, he had praised General Sani Abacha. That was the man who annulled the June 12th election, the man who killed Kudirat Abiola right on the street of Lagos. So you begin to wonder, are we really interested in justice, or we are interested in just seeking electoral fortunes? If we are genuinely interested in justice, we need to account for the lives that have been lost these past years and to ensure that their families, are compensated with justice, which is the most priceless thing that any victim of right violations can ever value. So I think we are not a serious country. If you see what happened in South Africa when we were talking about, the reconciliation panel, a lot of people were invited, and those who committed those crimes, they came up to admit and apologize to the country. But up to today, Babangida, who announced that election, is still arrogant, though empty, but still very arrogant about what he did, and he's fast so proud. And a lot of people still worship him today to see him as their hero. So when people, and I know a lot of people also, like Zachary Bill, who was the Ashet, who did the Ashet job, for Abacha. Many of them are still, working on the streets. In fact, a lot of people who are advisors to Abacha are still in this government, parading themselves as heroes. Kensarua was there, was judicially murdered. Those who carry out that assignment are still in, top government positions. And these are the people that are still ruling this country. So we still have a long way to go. But I think what has happened in the decision to honor Abiola is really not a step backward. It's one step forward. But we could take at least 10 steps forward to ensure that we actually want to achieve justice. This is just one step forward, which is not an entirely bad step in the first place.
Finally, we're also concerned, Nigerians are also concerned about those who have fallen victims of the June 12th quagmire. What should be done for this?
It's quite unfortunate that we don't even have the records. And apart from blaming some of us in the human rights movement too, because we need to give a good account of the atrocities that people encountered, in this dark era. At the University of Nigeria, for instance, I remember students were kidnapped. They were sent by Babangida's agents. I remember that on July 7, no fewer than 43 people were killed on the streets of Lagos. We were having demonstrations, and I was part of that demonstration. They were shot down. Some, they took their dead bodies and threw them into the Atlantic Ocean. No trace. They were just declared missing. And up to today. You remember the case of Okoba? 8 people from one family were shot dead. They fought that case for so many years. They got a check. The day they were supposed to go and pick that check in the bank, armed robbers attacked them and took that check away from them. So what are we talking? This country remains a cemetery of great dreams. It remains a cemetery of injustice. And I think the blood of those of millions of people who have suffered deprivation, that blood is crying. That blood is seeking for justice. Unfortunately, no leader has been able to listen to those cries. And until we listen to those cries, Nigeria will continue to live in a state of illusion, that will continue to haunt generations upon generations. Look at the Civil War. I cover so many stories relating to the Civil War. Soldiers, children that were born at that time, whether their mothers were raped, whether those women were taken by force, and they gave birth to children and all that. Those children are there today, traumatized. They can never recover from that kind of experience. And of course, millions of people that lost their lives during that war. Soldiers that were readmitted into the policemen, they are admitted to Nigerian police and Nigerian armed forces, but they were never paid their entitlements. Broken homes, the closure of Concord newspapers that so many people saw as their hope. They were working there. After the death of Abiola, those newspapers died. Tempo magazine, the News magazine, Tell, those newspapers are gone. In South Africa, Soweto was the mouthpiece of the revolutionary movement. The first thing the ANC did when it came to power was to ensure that Sowetan newspaper did not die. Today, we no longer have Tempo, we no longer have Tell, we no longer have PM News. So what are we talking about? So it means we don't have a sense of history. And a lot of people today who are students of history don't even understand the role that some of these newspapers play in this very bitter struggle to liberate ourselves from the claws of repression. It's unfortunate that the agents of those dark years are still here today, right with us, parading themselves as our heroes.
As 2019 elections approaches, what does this portend for Nigerians in general? And what do Nigerians actually expect or look forward to?
I think, first of all, we Nigerians suffer the affliction of captivity. We are a captured people. Most Nigerians are zeroing in to two political parties, the PDP and APC. It's not their choice. But given the socio-economic circumstances, those are the two options imposed on them. There is no people's alternative, except individuals that are coming out now, people like Showore, coming out to give hope to the people. But we hope that there is going to be a free and fair election, and that at the end of the day, the will of the people will triumph. But as it is now, I think we have a long way to go. What can save us is a free and fair election where the true will of the people will not be submerged, by the hegemony that has been ruling us for several years.
Comrade Wale Adeoye, thank you very much for
the
insightful analysis. Really appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.